Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills, and grit take centre stage. I'm Donal O'Donoghue, and this is episode 22. The podcast is sponsored by Sanderson, talent solutions that transform businesses globally. In this episode, I am delighted to be joined by yoga teacher, lawyer, and author Sarah Grace. Hi, Sarah. You are very welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
And thanks for joining us on a beautiful summer's day in Dublin.
Beautiful. I'm so delighted to live here.
Well, you didn't always live here. And this is what we like to kind of understand a little bit with guests, your background. Where did you grow up? Tell us about the family.
So you would never tell from my accent. I'm originally French. So my mom is French. My dad is Irish. He left Ireland in his early 20s and kind of never came back. So I didn't live in Ireland until, when did I move here? 2016.
You would never guess.
Right, and I didn't have this accent either. I spoke like this, like super. No, I'm joking. I had a weird kind of American, Canadian, a bit of French in there, a bit of like American school, like international school.
You went to
accent.
international school?
International school, yeah. So we grew up in France. I was born in France, grew up in France until I was maybe 5. And then we moved to Japan for 6 years.
Wow.
Which was amazing. And
what part of Japan were you in?
So we did Kobe for 1 year, which is just off Osaka, and then 5 years in Tokyo.
Wow.
And Japan, it was kind of the bubble land of my childhood. Like, I just remember it being amazing. Even at the time, it just all registered how clean, how safe, how kind and respectful the people are. Everything was just beautiful. Everything was pristine. And then we moved back to France when I was 11. And that was a bit of a culture shock, actually, moving back to Europe. And
so what do you consider your native language in terms of what you think in, what you dream in?
This is a fascinating question. I remember a time I didn't speak English. Mm-hmm. So when I was very, very little, and I think my dad then realized, like, oh, shit, I have to talk to my child in English or she's not going to learn. So I do remember a time I didn't speak English. I'm probably more comfortable in English now just because I live here and I work in English. But when it comes to dreaming, and I've had this conversation with my sister because we're both bilingual, I don't dream in a language. So if I have a dream about this podcast, I'll dream about the layout and people talking and I know what they're saying, but I couldn't put a language down on how they're speaking.
Do you know, one of the reasons I ask you is because I'm a recruiter, and part of the job when you're doing kind of senior level recruitment is personality profiles and personality assessments and behavioral assessments. And we always say they have to be done in the mother tongue because it's the instinctual response that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So would that be French?
Fascinating. Probably more English now, just because the way I think in terms of work is English. But if I revert to like an emotional state, I'll move back to French. And counting, I count in French because that's the language I learned mathematics for the first time. And I developed this condition called synesthesia, which is, I think it was like a coping mechanism at the time because I was learning French English. I was like a disaster at math. And to try to cope, I see numbers and letters. Like if you spell letters out, I see them in colors. So if I see a phone number ring me, I'll see all the different colors of it. And I looked it up because my sister doesn't have it, but a lot of bilingual kids would. And it's basically a coping mechanism. Like your brain couldn't cope with all this information. So it's just a way to try to use the other side of your brain and kind of coordinate the two to remember things. So
it's fascinating.
Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre.
And what kind of kid were you? What were you into as a kid?
I was quite a happy kid, I think. Like, I remember in Japan, the schools always said, like, she's just always smiling. Like, she's such a smiley kid. And I think that went back to, it felt like Bubbleland. It was a lovely school, like all girls school, international, but kind of half Japanese, half international. So I was really happy there, very much into art. So just loved anything creative, like creating anything. If it was painting, collage, like building something, I just was into that. And then when we moved back to France, which is probably around when the teenage years start, I kind of went back into my shell and I became very shy. And I think we were very privileged in that we grew up in a multicultural environment and multilingual environment. And so we were always used to kind of observe first and listen and don't speak until you kind of have, gathered enough information to know what to say, because you don't want to put your foot in it or say something wrong or whatever. And I think when I came back to France, I just all my markers were gone. I didn't really know how to deal with this very different Western society. And I was always the silent, quiet one.
And it's a weird time as well, the teenage years, when we often talk about that, where the main driver in the teenage years is like acceptance from the group and fitting in, and that must have been quite challenging.
Yeah, it was. And I think like, when we came back to France, the first year of school was a French school, and that was I found it really tough because it was an environment I wasn't used to, and I was used to like jumping from one language to the other. And you couldn't do that anymore. They kind of see it as showing off. The school system's also very different. So when I was in Japan, the school was more of like an American format. So you didn't really get graded like in primary school. It was like, you've got potential, you're doing a good job. Like, you get like a blue sticker, and the teacher probably had their own grading mechanism, but you didn't feel it as being judged. And then in France, it's very much like you are marked out of 10, and for every mistake you make, we deduct 1 point. And you can very quickly go into the minus. And it felt a lot harsher as well, on top of, growing into those teenage years. So it was a bit of a shock. But Bill's character, I suppose, as my dad tried to save me at the time.
And did you always have an interest in the legal area, or what did you think when you were in those years of school? What did you think life would hold in store for you career-wise?
So that's an interesting one. Law was always kind of there. It had been dropped very early on, and I think just because I loved to argue and debate, and I was, even as a child, like, go to bed. Why do I need to go to bed? Why? I'm not tired. What is the reason? Please give me the reason for this. So my dad and my mom were always like, you're going to be a lawyer someday. And I think that kind of stuck. But then as I was looking at, different careers, I was really creative. So I was like, I'd love to be an architect, or I'd love to be an interior designer and like work with colors and materials and build stuff. And then the penny dropped. I need to be good at math to do that. So, and I was hopeless at math. I just really struggled with it. So anything to do with like math or science was kind of ruled out. And I kind of liked the idea of law, I think largely because in France, it's similar-ish to the Irish curriculum in that you do lots of different subjects. It's not like the A-levels where you do 3 subjects. And we studied like the option international baccalaureate. So you had the 9 topics under the baccalaureate plus an extra 3 A-levels, or 2 A-levels, I think, and with an option to take a third. But in all of the courses I was doing, law wasn't there. So we did business, we did economics, we did science, but law was always the kind of elusive one. And I was like, I don't know, I've seen the movies, like it sounds interesting. And I guess I kind of fell into it a little bit, and went to university to study law. I think the other like factor in making that decision was I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so law was like, well, it's broad enough that you can do lots of different things. And it just teaches you how to think in a certain way, how to like research your sources, how to write, all of that stuff.
And did you do law through French or through English?
Both. So I did, it was like, I did an Erasmus year back in France, which was quite strange. But I went to London and I did law and French law in UCL, which is University College London. And so it was 3 years in the UK and then 1 year in France, and you do like a certificate. So you're not entitled to practice law or anything, but you have like a basic understanding. And then if you wanted to, you could convert that into a master's.
Okay.
But I did not like the way French law worked. And again, it really illustrated in my brain, like, to me, English is much more fluid. Like, there's like a personality to languages. French is very precise. It's very exact. It's actually quite mathematical, like even the way you learn conjugation and stuff. Whereas English is a lot more fluid. It's a lot more creative. Like if you look at the grammar, it makes no sense. Like there's no clear rules in how you conjugate different verbs. They're just completely different, or there's no clear rules as to spelling. And they approach law in the same way. There's much more room for arguing either side of the whatever point you're making. Whereas in France, it's like, well, the law says ABC, therefore we apply ABC, and it's a lot more rigid. So I think I did a year there and I was like, this is not for me. Like, I'm not into learning these entire textbooks off by heart and rehearsing them. Like, to me, there's no kind of intellectual value to that. Of course there is, but there wasn't to me. I didn't feel like, satisfied doing that. Whereas, thinking an argument to death and like trying to find all the different points I can make. I find that really interesting.
So did you make the decision then to come to Ireland and do the FE1s, or what was the route that you had to take?
So kind of like you, I deferred a little bit because I went to university thinking, brilliant, I've got like 4 years to figure out what I want to do with this degree, and then got the degree and still didn't know. And I had done a bunch of like, work experiences, and I tried everything from like, law to diplomacy, like did an amazing work experience in the Irish embassy in Uganda. And I still didn't really know where I wanted to go. So I decided to take a gap year, which wasn't really a gap year. Like it was a year of working. And back to the multicultural environment where I grew up in France, my godmother was from Laos. And so she was like, I have a friend in Cambodia. If you can get yourself to Cambodia, like pay for the flight, she'll give you bread and board if you work in this school outside of the capital. And I was like, sounds great. Get a bit of life experience, like let's do it. And I was supposed to go for 3 months. I stayed for nearly 8 months, fell in love with the place, and then came back home, still didn't know what to do. And I was like, I better start like studying for the FE1s.
When you say came back home, you came back to
France, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So kind of that's where my parents are based. I was kind of butterflying around. I was still thinking, maybe I'll go the entrepreneurial route. Maybe I'll do my own thing. And I don't know. I don't think I had that like fire in me to start my own business. And I always kind of doubted my capabilities of, I know very little. Back to the point of like, listen first and then speak. I was like, I don't know enough to just set out and do this. So I'll get my lawyer's qualification, because then that buys me another few years. And then I can still pivot into something else if I want to. And then for my sins, I'm still a lawyer. But, now I'm very happy with where I am. But it's funny looking back, I kind of was resisting that path so much. And I was like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to, graduate, get a job, get a mortgage, get the 2.3 kids, the car, and then retire and die. Like that sounded like my idea of hell. I hate a routine. So, kind of getting a job and getting the training contract to be a lawyer was pretty overwhelming, actually. And I was pretty miserable for the kind of first years. And then I think I settled into it and found my own place. But it took a while to get there.
Very good. And I suppose that brings us to when you were in Dublin and living in Dublin.
Yeah.
You had a pretty traumatic experience.
Yeah. So I suppose if we like take a step back, I came here in 2016, so my dad's originally Irish, and I have some family here, but, not many in Dublin. Like I have a cousin and then a couple of aunties in like around Dublin and Drogheda. But, I didn't get to see them that much. It was like a really busy time in my life in terms of like the working hours. So 3 years later, because that's about the time it takes to get your training contracts. It's kind of 2.5 years of work, back to Blackhall to do your exams, back into work and so on. And so I finally qualified as a solicitor, and it was a time where I felt like I had achieved so much, the world was ahead of me. I had a very clear idea in my mind that I wasn't going to stay in Ireland.
Oh.
So I don't know why. I think at the time I just didn't really have any ties here. And, every chance I had, I would kind of run home or back to London, which is, where I studied, and I fell in love with London. So I got in that summer we were celebrating, we were having a great time. We had like this whole ceremony of kind of like a graduation. And I suppose I might just give like a little trigger warning for the audience, because it does involve like a violent sexual assault. But I came home one, summer after like a weekend away, and it, in a nutshell, was attacked by a stranger in my own home. So a burglar broke into my apartment, and he broke in through my bedroom window, and I didn't wake up. It was a pretty horrific attack. Like I remember very clearly thinking at the time, I'm gonna die, and like that was just a certainty in my mind. It only lasted maybe a few minutes, but my world after that was turned upside down, and it felt like everything, that I had done and everything I'd worked towards just was reduced to ash. And it was quite a tough period in my life where I didn't know how to come back from it. 2, I think, there's lots of role models in life that you can follow, whether they're in your professional career or in your personal life, or maybe it's like an athlete you look up to, there was no role model for what I'd been through of, coming out the other side. And I remember thinking the only kind of model I have are these pictures in the press of, like a window pane and it's raining outside and there's a girl curled up in the fetal position with like preferably a black shawl over her shoulders and looking sad. And I was like, that's my life now. That's who I'm going to be for the rest of my life, is a sexual assault survivor. And it took me a while to realize that actually, if you stay true to yourself and you just, keep doing you, and we all go through, ups and downs, sometimes horrendous downs. But if you keep being true to yourself, that's the fastest way, number one, to heal, but number two, to flourish in life. And when that penny dropped, it's funny, it dropped not just in terms of the attack, but also in my professional life. Because I was like, why am I spending so much time hiding who I am and, kind of feeling like I have to, not disclose a certain part of me and wasting this valuable effort instead of just being my true authentic self, unapologetically so, and focusing on the values I care about, which are kindness, respect, helping others. And once that penny dropped, it kind of just everything aligned in life. It wasn't like one eureka moment. It was over a number of months, if not years.
Yeah.
But it certainly was the trajectory that I followed.
Yeah, and it was, going back to that moment, it was the ultimate fight or flight moment, wasn't it?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Reading your book, it was like you're awakening, not understanding what was going on, and
yeah,
it's that life flashing before your eyes kind of moment.
It really was. Like, that's one thing the movies get right. And yeah, so I wrote a book about, not just what happened to me, like that's the very beginning of it, but I wrote a book afterwards when, I kind of had been through a couple of years of my journey to kind of, one, raise awareness for people as to, what survivors go through, two, to talk about like the criminal justice reform. But I also wanted to talk about, like the feelings that survivors go through on their own. Like, it's such an isolating, feeling and experience to have, because you've got all these like feelings of shame and whatever. But when you even take it back to the attack and having gone through that fight or flight, in any other situation, like if it was a car crash, if you were mugged in the street, if, pretty much any other situation, you would be able to talk about what you went through. And, when you do go through a kind of a fight or flight or freeze or fawn moment, it really strikes to kind of the core of your identity. So it strikes to what they call your lizard brain, which is like really like the bare bones of, if everything else shuts down, that's what's left. And that really stays with you. And I thought I found it really tough to not be able to talk about that, because I needed to process it. And my way of processing is talking. It was it was absolutely terrifying. Like, I really thought I was going to die. And, looking back at it, it can't have lasted more than 5 minutes, but it felt like, a scene in a movie that lasted 20 minutes, maybe 30.
Yeah. And what did you learn about, you touched there on the criminal justice system, obviously with the lens of a lawyer looking through it, but then as a survivor of a situation like that, what did you learn about the criminal justice system in Ireland?
A lot that I wasn't delighted about. So yeah, I suppose, I did know a good bit, because as you say, I am a lawyer, and I grew up in France, and in France, our sex ed includes, how to deal with rape or sexual assault and what to do. So I guess I was a little bit more clued in that maybe the average person might be in Ireland. But, the police arrived pretty much immediately afterwards. Like, we rang them, they came in, and like, looking back at it, the moment they walked into the apartment should have been the moment the nightmare was over. And actually, that's the moment the nightmare really began, because, I had been attacked by this, person who did an absolutely horrible thing. But then you have, the guards and the criminal justice system have been created to protect people like you and me and victims of crime. And, the guards were amazing. Like I say in the book, there was no one person that, treated me badly or was awful. But the way the system was designed is to trip the survivor at every step of the way, whether intentionally or not. So the first thing I talk about in the book is, when the guards arrived and, they were lovely. They had not been trained to deal with somebody who'd gone through sexual assault through no fault of their own, by the way. And like, it's not easy for them to be in that situation. They maybe didn't handle it the best they could have, again, through no fault of their own. But one thing that could have absolutely, killed the trial, and, we did get a conviction, like this guy is in jail now, is when I said, look, I've been sexually assaulted. I think I need to go to hospital. I like vaguely remember something about, you need to get tests done and record the evidence. So lawyer brain kind of kicked in. The guard, he was so nice, but he kind of leaned in and he was like, listen, I really don't recommend it. You've been through enough and it's really invasive, and, maybe you've had enough, like maybe go home, like not go home because we were home, but like go to sleep and, go the next day. And the thing is, in those early moments after an assault, that's the time to go, because number one, you get all the evidence, you get all the shots against anything you could possibly have, you get the pregnancy test, like all that. But not more importantly, but as importantly, it's where your healing starts. And we have amazing centres in Ireland called SATU, which are sexual assault treatment units. And, every single survivor I've talked to, and, myself included, the experience has always been amazing. Like, they are just incredible. They are so well trained. They're gentle. They're not condescending or belittling. They actually had a bit of joy in them at times, which sounds strange to say, but I think that kind of cemented in my head, I don't have to be that girl curled up in the fetal position. Like, I can still laugh, I'm still me. And okay, something horrible has happened, but, I'm a very complex human. I'm not just one thing. And that was the first moment I realized that. I probably didn't even realize at the time that, that was a lesson I had learned. But that was so important. And then, going through like the investigations, so, like the guards were kind of, searching the home and stuff. And, they weren't always wearing like the like sterile gloves or whatever. And, I kind of had to be on their ass to be like, excuse me, like you need to do this properly or that evidence is not going to be admitted in court. But, a non-lawyer wouldn't think that. They shouldn't think that. Like, you should just think, these people have got my back. They're going to do everything by the book, and I don't need to worry about anything else.
They know what they're doing. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was a little bit disappointing. And then we moved to like the court system. And it is, it's just, you hear this all the time. Like, there's a huge amount going on in the news at the moment, which I'm sure many people find pretty triggering. But, it's all these delays, and it's all these like archaic procedures. And, I think one thing that really shocked me was the impact of the delay on me. And, my case happened in record time. So I think between the attack and the actual court case, it was 18 months. Which I was told was like record time, unheard of. Normally you're looking at 2 to 3 years, for many people a lot longer than that. And, in that time, you can't heal. Your life's on standby because you're waiting for this part to be over, and, you're hanging in by a thread.
Yes, you can't move on.
You can't move on. It's so traumatic. You can't even say what happened to you because, like in your head, it hasn't really, until you get that verdict, it's really hard to say, I was sexually assaulted or whatever it is. Now, in my case, it was very, very clear cut. So I suppose I could say it. But, if the person is known to you, which is the vast majority of sexual assaults, then you can't really say it, or, you're at risk of, being, in a defamation case or something like that. So your whole life is on standby until the trial. And we had a number of delays, which I had to fight tooth and nail on. And I think, again, lawyer mode kicked in. Like, I wrote these long emails and I was like, you can't do this because of this. And, I want this in writing. I want you to forward this email.
Who were you sending these to?
So
what examples?
You send it, you have to go through the guards.
Okay.
But you send it to the DPP. So the DPP are the people who take the case. And this is another thing I learned about, our criminal justice system is, in Ireland, if you are the victim of sexual assault or rape, you, in the eyes of the law, are not seen as a victim of crime. You are seen as a witness to a crime. And the idea is the crime has been carried out against society at large. And, the DPP is, suing on behalf of the society. But because you're a witness, you're not allowed to get, legal representation. The DPP can't give you legal advice or talk to you in any way. And, I remember, like, you get one
It's
meeting.
unbelievable.
Isn't
when
it?
You say,
it really is. And, like, I hadn't kind of put two and two together. And in France, where I knew a little bit more about it just from, friends and stuff like that, you're absolutely the victim. And, even just to be called, like, the complainant and stuff like that, like, it's just these small things. But when you're, at rock bottom, they cut so much deeper. And yeah, it was just eye-opening. Like, the whole system is designed where you're in the dark, and they use these terms that even me, a solicitor, didn't always follow, because I didn't have that kind of barrister background. And they were like, oh, we're proceeding to the arraignment, and I was like, what's an arraignment? Like, is that where we charge them? Is that, they don't, like, break it down for you. And I was like, if I'm struggling here, and I had my family with me as well, like, I had eventually told them what happens. But for every survivor that comes forward, 1 in 2 doesn't tell another soul. So, like, a lot of people have to deal with this on their own, and they don't have the kind of, maybe somebody more, I don't want to use the term, like, stable, but, I felt very fragile. So I needed somebody who was just kind of there to help and kind of be like, that's not right. You need to push back on that, or I'll push back for you. I'll ring them and tell them what's what. So yeah, just lots of obstacles throughout the way, but the delays were one that was absolutely, like, just breaks your heart. And it feels like you're hanging on by a thread. You're just crawling to get to this point in time. And then they tell you, no, sorry, barrister for the defense just decided the guy's not fit to be tried today. Or they'll throw in, some small, like, excuse that they could have dealt with before to save you the pain. And, you've built yourself up and you've mustered all the strength you have in your body to get to court. And they basically tell you, sometimes on the day, it's not proceeding. So I remember they told me, because it was during COVID, my trial, and they rang me to say it was supposed to go ahead in November 2020. And I think they rang in September. I think it was around September, and they were like, with COVID and everything, there's, like, a backlog of cases. We're not going to get to yours. And so don't come. And, we'll push it back, like, a year. And, like, that again, when, every single day is torture, asking somebody to wait another year is unforgivable and unacceptable, frankly. So that's one I fought back tooth and nail. And I was like, I am coming over. We are going ahead. And I will take the risk of it being put back, which means it being delayed on the day. And then thankfully on the day, so there were a couple of cases before ours, and I think one of the guys didn't show up. So they put that case back. And, I was able to go forward at the expense of another victim who didn't get her or his, likely her statistically trial that day. And that just breaks your heart. And then the other one, which, we kind of talked about, which I raised on Tommy Tiernan, is the seizure of the counselling records. And that to me is, the most heinous of them all. So in Ireland, for people who don't know, if you are the victim of rape or sexual assault, and, we go to trial, the defence will automatically seize your counselling records or therapy notes, i.e. the notes that your therapist takes in the sanctity of a therapy room when you're trying to deal with what's happened to you. And the sole purpose of it is to be used as evidence against what the victim is saying. So if it backs what you're saying, which it did in my case, 100% aligned, they don't use it. However, they don't use it in court, but the entire defense team have read it. The prosecution team have read it. And, the most shocking of it all is the accused gets to read, your deepest, darkest thoughts. And
you presume it's in a safe and confidential space.
You assume, everything that we've ever heard is this is one of the most sacrosanct rights like your medical records, like they are private to you. And the whole, the only value of therapy is that it's a safe space. It's a private and intimate space where you can, open up that box with a trusted, advisor and counselor who can help you work your way through. But if you know that those notes are going to be disclosed in court, you're going to be watching what you're saying, you're going to be holding back. And so there's no point to the
Completely
counseling.
nullifies the benefit, doesn't it?
Completely. And so in my case, what happened is I wasn't made aware of this when I started to go to counseling. So I started, I think about maybe 3 weeks after my assault, so pretty quickly. And, was going to weekly sessions with an amazing therapist from the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. Like, again, if, for anybody listening in, no matter what happened to you, no matter when it was, those people in the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre are just formidable. They are so well trained. There will not be pity. There will not be, any kind of judgment. It's just this absolutely amazing, safe place where you can just be who you are and take your time and, open it up in your own time. So it was a really safe space to me. And I was only told maybe 6 months in, 6 months of weekly therapy, that this was going to happen. And, I had gone through a first violation of my body. And now it felt like a violation of my soul. And I thought, it's even more unforgivable because the first violation was carried out by, a man with very bad intentions. But the second one was carried out by a system that calls itself justice and is designed to protect us. And not only does it not do that, it goes out of its way to hurt victims of crime, whether intentional or not, but very much intentional. And so what happens is, and I spoke to, the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, I do a lot of work with them, spoke to, the CEO at the time, Nolene Blackwell, and now Rachel Morrow, and both amazing women and, who are doing a huge amount of work to help like tear this archaic law down. But the effect of it is, either a survivor will not go to therapy because they're trying to get to trial, which means they're delaying their healing. But, when you've been through, like we talked about fight or flight, you need therapy to deal with that. It's too big for the human mind to comprehend. And there's an amazing book written by Dr. Van de Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score that goes into like the science of it. And it's really eye-opening. And it kind of, to me, it cemented the fact that I needed therapy to get through it. So you either don't get therapy, which is really harmful and, exponentially like harmful to you, or you do go to therapy and then maybe you decide not to pursue the case because you don't want your notes being revealed to your attacker, which is literally the opposite of what the system is supposed to be doing. And again, for the vast majority of, sexual assault survivors, it's come at the hands of somebody they know. So in my case, a complete stranger got to read them. So I'll never really know, what his thoughts were. What I always assumed was he'd get some kind of perverted satisfaction from reading the impact. But if it's, a loved one, a friend, a family member, your boss, a colleague, somebody and I've had survivors reach out to me and say, I disclosed in therapy that I was adopted. Nobody knew this. And it came out and he now knows. And like, what a horrific violation that is when they already have so much power over you. And, now they are given this by the court system. Like, it just beggars belief.
So what has been done or what needs to be done because I presume it's a difficult system to change. So
it's a very difficult system to change. And to be honest with you, like, and this is a voice coming from the inside as a lawyer, I don't understand why. And, there's been so many survivors, like if not in the hundreds and the thousands, saying this needs to change and giving feedback and say, I've spoken to Minister Helen McEntee a good bit, our Minister for Justice, and, she's definitely like her intentions are in the right place. I'm sure she's under a tremendous amount of pressure internally, but I've said to her again, I was at the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre annual report launch only a couple of weeks ago and raised this issue again, and she's now committed to getting it removed. But I made the point at the time that, we have a criminal bill for sexual offences that's working its way through the Oireachtas at the moment. It's about to be signed into law. And I don't understand why we couldn't insert one provision, literally one or two lines of, this practice that has been set by precedent is now disapplied and no longer acceptable. Done. But I don't understand why that was not allowed. And I was saying to her, if there's resistance internally from the court system or whatever party it is, bring them out into the open. Like, let's have this out in the public arena, because I've spoken about this publicly many times. The reaction is always shock, disbelief, anger, fury, which is the correct, reaction to have. I've never had somebody say, no, I think that's fair. So, yeah, I think that needs to change. And, hopefully there will be laws to outlaw that. I think another one we need to get rid of is the character references for the accused. You have, on the one hand, you're taking the victim's counseling notes to disprove what she or he is saying, or they. And then on the other hand, you have, the accused who does not have to take the stand. The victim does always, or there's no case. The accused does not have to take the stand, and he can get a glowing character reference that is literally can be just, like magicked out of thin air. And you don't need to base it on anything. You can just be like, their boss or a priest or whatever and say, yeah, this guy is great, class, good lad. Based on what? And there's no cross evidencing or cross examination of that evidence. Now they're bringing in a law to say, if you do bring in a character reference, you have to kind of swear to it under oath. I don't think that's going to change that much. That seems like, glaciers move faster than the way we're changing our laws. So I kind of make the point that, our criminal justice system, like any legal system, is very slow to change. I think we're going to have to change minds first and society first. And then usually a change in society leads to a change in the laws. And we've proven that through referendums recently in Ireland. And I think we are starting to move in the right direction. And the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre have launched this amazing campaign that's now 1 year old called We Consent. And instead of talking about, all the negative aspects of sexual assault and rape and all the trauma that's involved, they're trying to flip it on its head and say, we don't have a history in Ireland of talking about sex and relationships and, consent in a healthy, positive way. And I think that's something I really struggled with when I moved here from France, which is, the country of romance, and they just talk about sex at the breakfast table with the parents, which is quite off-putting. But we're the complete opposite, and there has to be a middle ground where you can talk about consent not even in a sexual way, really. I think all parents should talk about consent to their kids, of when you go to the doctor or whatever, it's your body, you're still allowed to have a say in how you feel about something, or if somebody touches you inappropriately, maybe you don't want to hug. I know some women I've talked to have, children who are autistic, and they don't like being hugged. They should have a right to say, don't touch me. Just because I'm a child doesn't mean you can come and wrap your arms around me if I don't want that. And, I know that as a survivor, after my attack for the guts of a year, I couldn't be touched. And sometimes people forget or just don't know, and they go for the handshake or they go for the hug, and it was literally the panic attack was coming quick every time. And, I think consent is something that's been a bit of a dirty word. It's actually a beautiful thing. It's all about respect and kindness and, trying to build understanding of the other person. And, I think one thing that I think might have been omitted in consent up until now is men actually don't get involved that much in the conversation. And I think there's maybe an element of fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. And so, maybe we haven't been good at including men in that conversation. What We Consent is trying to do is bring everybody in and say, some men have never had the chance to talk about consent, and, they kind of think, do I need to sign a contract to kiss this girl? Or, it doesn't have to be like that. It can literally be a conversation like, how does that feel? Are you enjoying this? Do you want to do this? Or whatever. It can be very chill. But we've never kind of, again, had that, I was talking about role models earlier. I feel like men don't, and particularly younger boys who are growing up into men, don't have that role model. So I'm hoping that with this campaign, which is, a long-term campaign over a number of years, we're going to be able to change minds, which will hopefully change our criminal justice system.
When you think about rebuilding your life, and you touched on there, after the attack, that it takes a long while to even normalize a handshake or a hug, or and to build that trust again. Did that begin immediately, or did that begin after you had the guilty verdict for your attacker in court, or what was the process like to begin that healing and to rebuild and find yourself again?
Really interesting question. The thing, I'll always start by saying healing isn't linear. It's these like ups and downs. And I think immediately after the assault, like, and I talk about it in the book, I actually couldn't believe at the time it was happening. And I think afterwards, it took me a while to accept it had happened. And I think a part of it was, again, this stigma around being a survivor and, thinking you only have kind of one option, which is to retreat to the shadows and never come out into the sunlight again. I think I was just in denial. So the healing hadn't really started. It was just kind of maybe on hold. And I felt like I was in autopilot for a lot of the time. And I think maybe the first or second time I got into that therapy room, and I realized like, oh, this is like a really nice safe space, and I've got something to look forward to, and start to open it up. I think that's maybe where my healing started. The other thing is, as you said, I'm a yoga teacher, and I had a symptom called dissociation at the time, which kind of means you feel completely disconnected from your body. So, I remember like looking down at my hands, and just my brain could not compute, these hands are mine. They're my hands. Like I can move them. Wow. I was like, it was almost like a video game. I was like, this is just some hand I control, but they're not mine. And in the same way, I was able to, like walk down a street and I'd look at traffic, and I literally remember thinking like I could just jump in front of a car and like nothing would happen. Like I was convinced of that. And so yoga actually helps me reconnect to my body. And I think for healing for something like this, because it's both a physical harm, but also very much an emotional harm, you kind of need to work on both aspects. Maybe not at the same time, because it's like hugely overwhelming and it's really not linear, as I've said. But, I started with literally rolling out my yoga mat and sitting down and pressing my hands down on the floor and feeling that connection against the floor. And that was a moment where I was like, oh my God, I felt that. Like, that's my hand. That's my body. Like, I'm reclaiming it. And the same with the therapy. It started bit by bit. And, there were moments where I thought I was fine. And then I would have a massive setback. And it was literally one step forward, 15 steps back. But I think, and I love this theme of your podcast of the grit. You have to keep powering through. And I've heard, pretty much every person I've heard on your podcast talks about just don't give up, keep going. You're not going to get it right every time. You probably won't get it right most of the time, but keep going. If it feels right. And, I'm a big believer in like, listen to your gut. So, because the head goes into overdrive after, a trauma like this, but your gut knows intuitively what it needs. And so, for me, it was like when I rolled out the yoga mat, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I just had this gut feeling of like, roll out the yoga mat, just do it. And then I kind of looked at it and, I was it's very hard to block, and you're not trying to block out the mind, but you're trying to listen to something deeper and calmer than the mind. And it was almost like my body just went down, and I was like, okay, so I want to go down, so let's go down. And, hands reached out, and you kind of just follow the body and you kind of have to give it the space to let it happen. And so I talk a huge amount about healing actually in the book, because that was the one thing, I feel very privileged that I've accomplished for myself. And, many survivors don't have that for a huge variety of reasons. And, every survivor is different as well. So yoga may not work for another person. Therapy doesn't work for everybody. But I was trying to give them like all the tools I got and, put them out there. Like, these work for me, give them the try. Hopefully it works for you.
But it's really interesting, the connection between mind and body, because whether it is a really traumatic event or an attack, or whether it's people that we've had on in the past that talked about, hitting the most difficult, the low point in their life for different reasons, it seems to always have that mind-body connection, that actually investing in yourself and not allowing things to ruminate. And whether that's, getting to the gym or yoga or
Yeah.
whatever it is, but there's always that connection between mind and body,
Yeah,
isn't there?
there always is. And what I find really interesting is, I was chatting to a friend of mine who he went through a bit of a traumatic patch in a very different sense himself. And he started taking to running. And he felt amazing after running. And you do, like, it's good for your body. You get the release of endorphins, amazing. But he was like, the more I ran, initially I felt amazing. And then the more I did it, the more maybe I got used to it. And, the negative thoughts would kind of come back the second I got home and changed. And at one point he realized, like, I'm running from my feelings. And so, the connection between mind and body, you're spot on, but you have to give room to both. So that's what I like about yoga, is that it's a bit slower. So you're really in the moment of, like, you're, trying to feel your body, but you're giving your mind the time to process what you're doing. And I love running, like, I love exercise. And when it came to the trial, my poor sister who was stuck with me, I was like compulsively exercising every day just to keep the anxiety at bay. But I never felt calm in the way I did when I do yoga. And, I think at that stage, like, if I had done yoga and sat down, I probably would have had a panic attack. Like, it was too much. So you have to be a bit compassionate with yourself as well and try different things. But yeah, I think any trauma, the fight or flight, like, it hits your brain, but it also hits your nervous system, like the adrenaline floods into your blood system. So it does hit the body in many different ways. And that book of Dr. Van der Kolk is amazing at, talking through how it really is your body. It's not just your brain that keeps the score. And so, people find kind of solace in different physical exercises. Maybe it's swimming, maybe it's walking, maybe it's breathing. Like, breathing is movement. And I think, to me, it was all about going with what, they call in yoga the flow. So just, if things come to you, just go with it. If you, feel like you want to sit down, sit down. If you feel like you want to walk, walk. What you're trying not to do is resist. So even when you're in a pose and you feel like the body tensing up and you're like, I shouldn't be in this body, it's unnatural. You kind of just try to ease into it and not, strain anything. It's amazing the impact just what I've described has on the brain. And I think, to me, I got crazy into my yoga after my assault, and I kind of, built up a lot of strength. And it was physical strength, but it felt like mental strength as well. And, I was like, well, if I can accomplish this, like, grasshopper pose that I've never been able to do before, then I'm unstoppable. Like, I can do this. And it weirdly kind of sets this positive cycle in your life of, I can do this. I can do, like, I can do anything I put my mind to if I train and, am patient with myself and don't beat myself up if I fall. And I'm going to fall a lot, and I just kind of take that for granted, and I'm going to get to where I want to be.
It's an amazing mindset. What was the process of writing the book like? Was that kind of healing and cathartic, or was it triggering and traumatizing, or maybe a bit of both?
Probably a bit of both. So the sequence was, had the trial, so the attack, 18 months later, the trial, and then got the verdict. And I connected with an amazing journalist in the Irish Times, Una Mullally, who published an article in the Irish Times. And from there, I got the offer to write the books. It was pretty quick after the trial. And I think I felt comfortable at the time, like I had pretty much processed the attack and what had been done to me. What I had not processed was the court system and all of that, lengthy experience. So writing the book, I think initially, like, when the offer came, I'd never written a book before. I didn't know if I could write, but I wasn't dumb enough to say no. I was like, I've always wanted to, this is kind of like a bucket list thing, so let's do it. And my condition was, this is not like a story about me, it's to help other people. So I want to design it in some kind of maybe like a survivor's manual or something with chapters per theme. And they were fully on board with that. So I think I wrote the easy chapters first. Now, it kind of followed the sequence of the attack. So funnily enough, like, the first 3 chapters wrote themselves, because it was like fact, then the attack, then the guards, then the, this, then this. So that was easy. What was really difficult was writing the pieces on, dealing with your anger, dealing with your emotions, healing. And also, there's, I think, 3 chapters on the court system. And I found them pretty traumatic to write. And, I clearly hadn't processed it. The way I was processing at the trial is I had a little black notebook, and I was just literally taking notes of everything. And it was just my way of trying to take some control back. If I was writing down like names, times, number of the case, where we went, street, time, like recording everything, people talking in the courtroom I was writing down, jury reactions, I was writing everything down. And you can see where it got to like the defense making their case, and there's some pages where my pen's gone through the paper. I was so angry, like writing the stuff down. And like reading those back, the human mind is amazing. Sometimes we're very good at like, once something traumatic has passed, we can put it in a box and not revisit. And when you do revisit, having done it now, I think it's probably better, because you really do get a grasp on it and kind of deal with what's happened. But it's not easy. And like, I had to write the book very quickly. I think I wrote it in 6 months, and then there was maybe 2-3 months of editing, which was very, very fast. But I was on such a high after the Irish Times article and the outpour of love and support from the public and my friends and family, and most importantly from other survivors who were saying just the fact that you spoke out, I've never told a soul, I finally realized I'm not alone, like that was carrying me. And so I just kind of kept going with the book. And I think when I wrote the last page, I just like put the pen I was between the laptop, and sometimes I'd like write in my notebook, but I just remember like breaking down into tears, and I think I cried for a solid 20 minutes, and it was just cathartic of like, get it out there. But to me, what was cathartic is helping people.
Yeah. And that really comes out actually, because we talked about it before we started recording. We were talking a lot about how you respond to events actually says a lot about who you are as a person and your character. And actually there's a few things that really impacted me in reading your story, but going back to the moment of the attack, the fact that you bit a chunk out of the attacker's hand, I think that's a really satisfying part to read in the book, because in that moment, like there are things like that you get a sense of the person, and actually what you've done and the way you've written the book, I think is really powerful.
That's good. I'm delighted at that, because I think the way I wrote it is it's kind of my story and then tied in with like the research I've done. But again, quoting a lot from that book, or from what my therapist said and stuff like that, and to say like, look, I fought back. But I think one of the biggest messages I always have for survivors is, number one, it's not fight or flight. There's actually probably more, but the four most known are fight, flight, which we both know, and then freeze and fawn. So freeze, everybody knows, and then fawn is actually, you're almost like complying with the attacker. And I always try to make the point to survivors, like, if you froze, or if you fawned, or if you tried to run and just weren't able to escape, that's not a judgment on your character or your strength or anything like that. That is your lizard brain, because every other part of your brain shuts down, making a decision in a matter of nanoseconds as to which one of these four statistically will be the most likely to save me. So, if a train is coming at you, freeze is probably not the one you're going to go with. It'll probably be like, move. But if, a human or an animal or something like that is attacking you, your brain might be like, well, is this, person or creature like stronger than me? Are they armed? Do I have somewhere to run? If I fight back, am I going to get maimed or killed? And so, that's why a lot of survivors fawn, because they're like, statistically, if I just go with it and, almost comply, it'll be over faster, and then I'll escape with my life. And the only like problem with that is, in your brain, the alarm receptors, when the trauma is happening, they don't shut down in the same way as if you fought or fled, because you don't have that moment where like, I'm safe, I'm okay. And to be honest, I didn't really either, because like at the beginning I did freeze on the bed for a second. I was like, what is happening? Like it felt like minutes on end. It was probably like 6 seconds. And then, fought him off twice, but like he overpowered me both times. And it's only when I bit out a piece of his hand that, he finally keeled over. But, I could have not done that, and like, touch wood, but like, who knows where I'd be now. And I always try to say that to survivors, like, you're here today. Like, you are here today, and you're gonna get through this in your own time. Whatever your journey looks like, it won't look like mine. That's okay. That's a good thing. But like, just be your true authentic self and just go with what feels right for you, and like, follow that. When it starts to feel right, follow that. Like, just blindly follow that, because that's where you need to go.
Do you think if you didn't have the legal background and you weren't on top of things as much as you were, even going back to the guards gathering evidence and everything, do you think that would have changed the outcome?
Ooh, probably.
Had you been a recruiter rather than a lawyer, for example,
Maybe. I don't. I'm afraid to think it. Possibly. Certainly not going to the sexual assault treatment unit, because that was, it's your word against theirs at trial. And in my case, like, it was a burglar broke in, so pretty clear cut. But the sexual assault treatment unit, like, the work they do in the report they give shows that it happened. They don't just record the sexual nature of it. They record, like, if there's bruises on your body. So I had, like, cuts and grazes on my knees. I had, like, blood around my mouth from where I bit him. Like, they recorded all of that. And they like combed my hair and got, like, they got kind of, I suppose, like, skin cells of his hand that was holding my hair. So, like, all of that went to prove what I was saying. And the same with the evidence. I don't think it would have been challenged again, because this guy was, like, a homeless man. Like, he didn't have a team of lawyers there to help him. But if he had, who knows what would have happened. And I think, like, again, I'm so, like, I hate this word, but I'm so lucky in a way, because it was like, the perfect crime. Like, I was fast asleep. There was no question of consent. There wasn't alcohol. It wasn't a date. It wasn't somebody I knew. It was very, very, very clearly, like, to anybody even just hearing the story.
That's what makes it so shocking.
That's what makes it so shocking. And I felt like I had to jump through so many hoops. And that's what fueled my anger as well, of like, I am a lawyer. I do have a clear-cut case. It was like 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night. I was asleep with, like, in my bed alone, and, was able to tell my family, had my family support there with me. Like, without those three things, that's what the vast majority of survivors have to go through. And, and they have to prove a case, and they don't even know what they're, arguing for. They don't know why the DPP doesn't decide to pursue the case. I was like, every single piece of evidence is so important. So I remember, those poor guards, I was probably a nightmare, because when we were going through, so, to add insult to injury, this guy, before he committed the crime, he broke in the first time, stole a bunch of stuff in my room, like my handbag, my phones, all of that stuff, went to stash the loot and came back. So when I was with the guards, I was, explaining, you have to say, like, what you lost. And I was literally going into every detail, because I was like, if they find the bag and there's one thing in there that I haven't said, they might, question it. And, I'm always thinking of the other side, like, what are they going to argue? So it's like, I'm literally going to tell you, like, every single receipt I've got in there. And, like, I think I had €2 coins, and the guards were like, I don't think we need this level of detail. I was like, write it down. And I was like, because I also knew that the more detailed my statement was, the more it went to prove my credibility, because I was like, everything I say lined up with what was in the bag. And I was very clear, when they said what time, I was like, I don't know, I didn't have the time. I know I went to bed at like 11 or midnight or whatever it was. It was after that. I know the guards came at this time, so it was before that, but I couldn't tell you. And the same when I was trying to identify him. So it was like, I didn't catch a clear view of his face, but I know he had like a beard and stubble. I know he had this. I'm not sure about this, and it was very, very clear. And it meant that come the trial, my statement was bulletproof, and I was very like methodical in how I was going through it. So, that's hugely important to a jury as well, to be credible. And it's something that, a lot of people don't think about, because it's so distressing going into that courtroom, and you're talking to literally a room full of 20, 30 people. And that was with COVID. So without COVID, it's probably more reporters. The guy, maybe he's allowed to have family there or a friend or whatever, guards everywhere. And you're trying to convince a jury of what happened to you, like you have to be credible. And, like we've seen time and time again, the damage it can do where, maybe somebody's not feeling, good about themselves. And I have a lot of survivors come to me and say, like, I think I'm going to cry. And I was like, good. Like, that is not a bad thing. Like, be yourself. Don't try to, be somebody you're not or say what you think they want to say. Stick to the truth and stick to your truth. And that will get you through. That will give you the best possible chance of getting through this trial.
Super. Tell us a little bit about life now. Some years have passed.
I'm still in Ireland, as you can tell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So I met a wonderful man, and so in a very happy relationship. I think, initially, like when I was going through the trial and stuff, my therapist was like, you can't leave Ireland now because, you're going to have to fly back and forth with this case and so on. It's going to be extremely traumatic. And then afterwards she was like, look, you've been through a lot. So maybe just, give it a bit of time. And I was very lucky in that, I left a job that was pretty toxic and was, in another firm and had like the most amazing boss who was just like such a champion of women and so kind, and so encouraging. So things kind of fell into place, and moved back to Ireland and after COVID. And I think I started to do a lot of work around, I thought, oh, we'll just talk to the Minister for Justice, get this little problem sorted, and then I'll go back to London or France. And then realized there's no change coming anytime soon. So I think I got locked into, campaigning, writing the book, and started to feel actually Ireland is home, which is a really nice way to be. And, I've always loved the Irish people. Like, I take offense at the weather, but, and used to the food, but actually we're getting better. But, the people are really what makes a home. And there's some amazing people in Ireland. And I think it's the culture as well. Like, we're very good at storytelling. We're very good at drawing connections and connecting with each other. And, we're a smaller country, so there's more of a community feel to maybe a place that's, a bit more anonymous like London. And I still love going there. And, I still miss my family, but very happy now and kind of, in my dream job. So, very blessed. Like, life is good.
Life is good. And
Life
it's
is
great
good.
to hear. And that's a lovely place to leave it.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, can I just say thank you so much, genuinely,
having
for
me.
coming in and sharing your story. The book is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Just for everybody, it's called Ash.
Ash and Salt.
Why is it called Ash and Salt?
Oh, do you have 5 more minutes?
Of course, we have 5 more minutes.
So I like to talk in metaphors. And so the title, interestingly enough, is about healing. So when I talk about the attack, I'm like, trauma, and particularly sexual trauma, it strikes to like the core of your identity. And to me, it felt like, this massive volcano had like blown a hole through every aspect of my life, like my sense of identity, my sense of safety, my relationship with friends and family. I couldn't touch people. And it just felt like everything had been reduced to ash. But actually, volcanic ash is the most fertile type of soil in the world. And if you, in the right environment, life can flourish and blossom from that. And so that part is about like how you find your healing in ash. The salt elements, the salt on the other hand is, like a very corrosive material. It can, corrode even the strongest of metals. And I talk about salt as in all the toxic things that might be in your environment that are going to hinder your healing. And, I talk about like, the Romans who kind of sacked the city of Carthage, and then they sowed salt all over the ash so that nothing would ever grow from it. So I kind of talk in the book about all those toxic things, whether it's, toxic thought patterns, toxic behaviors, maybe toxic friends or, environments like work environments, and how to clear that from the ash so that you can heal from it.
That is absolutely brilliant.
Thank you so much.
So what we will do is we will add links to your social media and to your book
Sure.
into the show notes. And just again to say thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for holding such an amazing podcast. Like I was saying it to you offline there, but I think it's such an amazing platform to hear people's stories like from beginning to end. So thank you for doing it.
If you've enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to our YouTube and follow our Instagram. It's @talentmatters_podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor, Sanderson, and we'll see you next time.